Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Southern New England edition of our webinar series exploring state findings from American Farmland Trust recently released Farms Under Threat 2040, Choosing an Abundant Future. Here's the agenda for an hour and a half together. And before we get started, let me run through some quick logistics. Everyone's been muted, so no need to worry about that. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so by going to the control panel on the right side of your screen. The orange arrow at the top of that panel allows the panel to shrink and reopen. You'll see a questions section of the control panel. You can pop that section out by clicking on that little square. That decouples it from the control panel. Please type your questions and comments in there, and we'll allow plenty of time for Q&As after the presentation. And when we're going through the maps on the web app, if the control panel is in the way, remember that you can shrink it by using the same orange arrow. Also note that there's a handout section. In there, you'll find the full report, as well as state summaries for all 3 states. We'll show you the state summaries when we go through the web app as well. We're recording this webinar, and we'll send the link to the recording to everyone who registered. Please feel free to share it widely. So now let me introduce myself and my co-host. I'm Nathan Latoile. I direct AFT's New England program, which has been working on the ground in the region since 1985. Our programs focus on building and protecting the soil, land, and farms of New England. Today, we're going to focus on Southern New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Co-hosting with me is Chelsea Gazzillo, American Farmland Trust New England Policy Manager, and she also leads our Working Lands project in Connecticut. Chelsea works on the long-term resiliency of agriculture by advancing policy efforts that support and foster our programmatic work on the ground. For those of you not familiar with American Farmland Trust, we're a national nonprofit membership organization founded in 1980. Some of you might know us by our No Farms, No Food bumper sticker. But the bumper sticker before this one said, it's not farmland without farmers. We understand that agriculture requires farmers and land, and we take a holistic approach to it. Our national initiatives and regional programs focus not just on protecting the land base, but also on the practices used on the land and the farmers who work the land now and in the future. Our programs and research inform our state and federal policy advocacy and analysis. We work from farm fields and kitchen tables to the halls of state capitals and Congress, with 6 regional offices and a national office in Washington, D.C. So I'd like now to turn this over to Chelsea to recognize our funder and to welcome our panelists.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you all for joining us. We'd like to recognize and thank USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service for their partnership and financial support for our Farms Under Threat research. Farms Under Threat is AFT's multi-year initiative to document the status of and threat to America's agricultural land base. NRCS has been invaluable to this entire research project, as has our research partner, Conservation Science Partners. For this report, we also collaborated with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I am extremely honored to welcome a few very special guests. Today, we are joined by Commissioner Brian Herlbert. The Commissioner has overseen the Connecticut Department of Agriculture since 2019. He has been dedicated to promoting and advancing agriculture since he served as a state representative in the Connecticut State Legislature from 2007 to 2013. Before being named commissioner, he served as the Connecticut Farm Bureau Association Executive Director. And prior to that, he served as the Connecticut State Executive Director for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Farm Service Agency as a presidential appointee in the Obama administration. Thank you for joining us today, Commissioner. Always good to see you. We're also joined by Commissioner John LeBeau. As the grandson of a farmer and son of a nursery owner, the Commissioner has been involved in agriculture his whole life. He was sworn in as Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture in 2015. Prior to this appointment, the Commissioner served 24 years as Selectman of Shrewsbury. From 2009 to 2015, he was the town administrator for the town of Princeton, a beautiful rural north central Massachusetts municipality with an active agricultural sector. We are glad to have you here with us today, Commissioner. And finally, I'd like to welcome Chief Ken Ayers. to our conversation. Chief Ayers oversees the Division of Agriculture and Resource Marketing of the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. He graduated from the University of Rhode Island in 1985 with a Master's of Science in Agronomy. He has been employed in the Agricultural Division of DEM since 1987 and has been chief since 1988. His focus areas at DEM include food system resilience, farm viability, farmland protection, climate change adaptation mitigation, and more recently, forest stewardship and management, given the recent merger of the Division of Forestry into Agriculture in 2021. It's an honor to have you here with us today. As someone, yeah, we're stoked you're here. So as someone who was born in Rhode Island, Massachusetts resident whose family still farms, and the Connecticut Working Lands Alliance director, I'm honored to work with each of you, and I'm grateful to hear your thoughts that you have to share with us this afternoon. You've each had a chance to review the summary findings from the report prior today. I've got a lot of questions here that I'd like to ask you. For this one, how about we start with you, Chief Ayers? What struck you most about the findings?
Well, like my counterparts, we've all been involved in farmland for protection almost our entire careers, and New England is a part of the country that early began to recognize the threat that existed, and our farmland protections, our programs are some of the oldest in the country. Rhode Island starting in the early 1980s. Rhode Island has the highest land values in the country, close to $16,000 per acre. That's, Connecticut and Massachusetts are not far behind. So money doesn't go as far here as it does in other parts of the country. And the pressure has been intense for all that time. I think the thing that struck me is, as hard as we've all been at it for many, many years, is that, even at the pace that we're at, the rate of conversion will be significant. This is the business as usual line that you've talked about in your report. In Rhode Island, for example, despite, staying with it, and at the projected rate of funding, we'll lose another 8,100 acres, by 2040. That's over 10% of our farmland. So to me, it just reemphasizes the reason that we need to keep at it, if possible, even at a faster rate, to be honest. We've got, multiple threats to our agricultural ecosystem in the country, despite the fact that in many ways some of the crises that we've gone through have even ramped up the recognition and the importance of a local food system. But keeping our farmers viable is one way of protecting farmland. That's really the first tool, and then the second tool is permanent protection measures, buying development rights and things like that. So that was one of the things that struck me up front.
Thank you for that, Chief Ayers, and I look forward to diving into the findings in more detail with you. Mr. Herlbert, what struck you most?
Well, thank you, Chelsea and Nate and AFT for doing this great research and inviting us to share our thoughts on it and elevate the challenges that we have before us. As Chief Ayers was saying, Rhode Island's preservation program has been around since the 80s. Connecticut's is the longest continually running program in the nation since 1979, which is probably before a number of folks on this call were born, that we started preserving farmland. And what I think it tells us, or it tells me, is that we need tools to respond to a challenge that's this large. That what we've been doing has been working, but not at the pace of the challenge that we're faced with. And so we need to be more responsive, more reliable to our partners out there, to preserve more land, We've been working on that at the Department of Agriculture. We have an executive order from the governor to close on properties within 2 years of applications, which is nearly a 50% decrease in the application period from our current programming. But even that may not be enough. And so I think we need twofold. We need to be able to get to farms more quickly to preserve them. And we need to make sure that Connecticut's farmers, or the farmers that we're going to recruit from Massachusetts and Rhode Island, see Connecticut as a viable agricultural community, that they want to participate, that they can make a living as a farmer in our state and provide for their family. And that will push off the development pressure. I think that will create the space to keep this community alive. And I'm not sure if the report took this into consideration, but there is an economy of scale here that is challenging. As we lose more farms, the farm service organizations, equipment dealers, feed suppliers, and everything else also move away, or it becomes more expensive. And so it creates, unfortunately, a rather downward spiral. So it's really important that we stop that pressure on landowners, cell developers, to make sure that they see this as a viable option in Connecticut. Hey, Chelsea, I think you need to unmute.
I've been doing Zoom now for almost 3 years, and still I forgot to unmute there. All right, so Commissioner, thank you for that, Commissioner Herlbert. And Commissioner LeBeau, what about you?
Well,
What
thank you.
most about the findings?
Thank you, Chelsea, and good afternoon, everyone. And, thanks to AFT for this fabulous work, and apologies. I'm on the road about to go to the Franklin County Fair, and my phone's camera is not cooperating with GoToMeeting. But with that, what struck me and struck us by the projection in the report discussing the number of acres lost to development in the period up to 2040, which for Massachusetts is 73,800 acres is what's projected. That is almost identical to the number of acres we have protected in the last 40 years in our state's APR program. We've protected 73,940 acres. We're off by 140 acres of what we've gained as opposed to what we're fearing to lose or what's projected to lose. So we were already concerned about the pace of farmland protection, but the report, the 2020 report on farmland loss in New England, actually exacerbated our concerns, and this report further underscores those concerns. So what we did was we realized we needed a plan for the state on how we were going to address those losses, protect more farmland, ensure its viability, and allow equitable access to that land. So for the past year, we've been engaged in a major stakeholder-driven effort, developing a farmland action plan to outline what it is that the Commonwealth, and that's government, local officials, land trusts, and the public, should and need to do to prevent further loss of farmland between now and 2050. The plan is yet to be released, but it will outline clear, measurable, and ambitious goals for farmland protection for the next few decades.
All right, thank you for that, Commissioner LeBeau. And sticking with you, how do you think this research can be used by folks on this webinar to help save farmland? And how do you think it can be used in Southern New England?
Well, I think the report is an incredibly valuable tool in helping create awareness of the importance of a local agricultural economy and the risks that are presented to the future of that economy by development. We simply need to do a better job educating the greater public, municipal officials, and policymakers about local agriculture and how important it is to food security and the value of protecting farmland. Certainly, we learned from the pandemic significant vulnerabilities in supply chains, which highlighted the importance of local food sources. We need now to better help the public make the connection between farmland protection and food supply.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBeau. And Commissioner Herlbert, do you have thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I would echo what Commissioner LeBeau just said. How you know the pandemic really put this challenge under microscope with the food system, and that as the supply chain was breaking down, our needs didn't change, and our needs didn't stop. We needed to feed families across the state. When food was coming in through the Farmer to Family Food Box program from Canada, from Mexico, you know, that was noticed, not only by folks like us in the policy world, but by the residents and the constituents who are picking those boxes up. You know, how come we're not supporting our local businesses? The pandemic did present a couple of great years of business for Connecticut farmers, especially agritourism and direct-to-consumer operations. And so we need to further that relationship and that understanding from the general public that having local food means supporting local farms, which means there should be a policy or a pointed policy to do just that, that you can't say one or the other and not put the tools in place. And what this research shows is that this is just not organizations like yours and mine saying this, that there's a real challenge out there. And if actions aren't taken, there are real repercussions for that lack of action. It is so hard to protect farmland. It is a long process. It has a lot of steps in it. It's a volunteer program, so it takes the right family and the right landowners to enter it. It is so easy to sell farms to developers. And so, you know, having the appropriate policy tools in place to combat that challenge and to meet it where it is really important. But I think the first and the easiest thing to use from this research is to say, if you want local food, you have to have local farms. This is what happens if we don't take aggressive actions now to protect these farms.
For that, Commissioner Herlbert. Chief Ayers, do you want to say, or do you want to answer this question as well?
I would echo what Commissioners Herlbert and LeBeau said. I don't think I could say it any better. The report lays it out well. It puts metrics to the argument and projects us forward. And that's important, you know, just as we see so many threats to the food system, that we have to make sure that we're maintaining, enhancing a steady, constant effort to protect farmland. I would echo the fact that any acquisition is long and difficult. It just takes time. Family dynamics are a big part of this. Decisions are made after, you know, 40, 50 years of working the land, and it's just not an easy thing. And so, you know, we have to recognize the complexity of all this, and that we just have to keep at it. But as we all went through the pandemic and the response of the public here in Rhode Island, I know that was true in Massachusetts and Connecticut and many other places, was I want to buy my food for down the street. You know, I want to avoid congregate shopping environments. I want to be able to look directly in the eyes of the person who's providing this food for me, whether it's coming from the ocean, from the land, and know where it came from. And you cannot do that if you don't know, if you don't have a locally based food system. And so this is really the thing that we're all concerned about from the standpoint of, you know, resiliency, supporting the local economy, supporting the landscape that we hold so dear to ourselves. In New England, farmland protection is a central part of that. And, you know, as I said before at the beginning, very expensive in our states. It takes a lot of money to do so, but it's critical that we keep at it.
Great, thank you for that. And finally, so I'm going to go to Commissioner Herlbert first on this question. And some of you have already kind of gotten to this a little bit in your answers. So This is just asking to further elaborate. What steps would you like to see state or local governments or even the federal government take to reduce the conversion of farmland?
Well, I think to the comments that we've been making is that we've got to put this as a priority. Back when I was a member of the Tallinn Town Council, we put together a referendum for $5 million in our community to preserve land. That was a lot of money for the community at the time, and still is a lot of money for a relatively small town to commit to preserving the land. A lot of other towns in Connecticut haven't done that. But in order for us to make this a priority, you've got to put the money there. And that money, because it's been leveraged through NRCS programs, DEEP programs, Department of Agriculture programs, has been returned multiple times. And so there's still a healthy balance remaining some 16 years later that we can continue locally to purchase the development rights to properties. That's a relatively easy tool that a community can have. It had to go to referendum, and voters accepted it and supported it overwhelmingly at referendum. We have funds at the state that we use. We leverage our federal dollars greatly. We are between 48 and 52% of every dollar spent on the development rights is either federal or local partners. So we do a good job of leveraging those dollars, but the more money that the locals have to share makes it that much easier, that much quicker to come in. I think at the federal level, another component would be there's a ASEP-AIL has a 50% cost match requirement. It's very generous, but it's only 50%. And so as we talk about these prices of land getting more expensive, again, we need the tools to address that appropriately. We have a $20,000 cap on per acre value that we can spend in Connecticut. We're looking to go to the legislature to revise that and revisit that, because $20,000 today isn't what it was in 1979 when the program started. We just had a parcel appraised at $75,000 an acre. So that $20,000 cap is really a detriment to our ability to meet people where the market is, and to encourage them that the preservation program is the right path and the right tool for them and their land. So those are two things that I think would allow us to be a little bit more nimble, move more quickly, and have more partners at the table as we try to do this work.
Thank you, Commissioner Herlbert. Commissioner LeBeau, do you want to answer the question?
Sure, thank you very much. Well, right to what Commissioner Herlbert just mentioned, ASEP-AIL program has provided crucial support towards farmland protection, and we've taken great advantage of it in Massachusetts. It also, we've talked about how long it takes to preserve land, and no shot at NRCS because we're the same. There's a lot of moving parts to get these things through now, just not one government process, but two. And I know NRCS, as I'm sure my counterparts in the other states, we're always looking for ways to try to streamline the program and make it less cumbersome. At the state level, we've engaged with hundreds of people throughout the state to develop the a statewide plan for farmland protection, as I mentioned. And as a result, we'll have a plan we can share with external partners so they can start making decisions, hopefully the right types of decisions. The hard data and analysis that AFT's provided on farmland loss really amplifies that message. And there is some support from communities in the state, and that's meaningful, but we also have to engage local government and just individuals to make them sure that they recognize the value to their communities of protecting farmland. And lastly, there should be a recognition of the inequities in farmland access through years of systemic racial discrimination and dispossession.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBeau. Chief Ayers, thoughts?
Great comments all around. I would only add to one point that was made that the federal government probably right now is better positioned than it ever has been to protect farmland in terms of funding. The Inflation Reduction Act just passed by Congress provides another $1.4 billion to be spread across the states for farmland protection. That's above and beyond the typical allocation. So we don't know yet how that will play out in our states, but there's probably been never a better time in the past several decades to tap into and leverage federal resources to protect farmland. But it does require a 50% match. So that's why the efforts at the local level, as Commissioner Herlbert said, in Connecticut, whether it's at a town level, a local NGO or a land trust or state government, all has to match that money to make it be effective in our state. So providing the match, which means that we have to stay at our local funding sources, keep them strong, keep them vibrant. Well, that's the only way to have this money that's been allocated in the Inflation Reduction Act to be put in play. And I think it's critical that we do so, that we get this money implemented, that we do our best to make the next few years particularly successful in terms of farmland protection in our states, and make sure we make effective use of this money as possible.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, folks. We welcome you to stay on for the rest of the webinar, but completely understand if you need to drop off. And now back to you, Nate.
Thank you. Just got to remember to unmute there. Thank you, Chelsea. So now we're going to dive into the methodology and the findings from the report. But before we do so, I'm actually going to ask my co-hosts and panelists if they wouldn't mind turning off their cameras for a little bit, so we can all see the slides a bit better. Thank you. So the first two Farms Under Threat reports, Farms Under Threat State of America's Farmland, released in 2018, and Farms Under Threat State of the States, released in 2020, mapped past conversion of agricultural land, first looking from 1992 to 2012, and then from 2001 to 2016. In this report, we're looking forward, using past conversion data to model and predict future conversion of farm and ranch land out to 2040. We started with our Farms Under Threat State of the States analysis of ag land conversion from 2001 to 2016. As a reminder, that analysis mapped conversion of land to two different types, urban and high density development, or UHD, and low density residential development, or LDR. Urban and highly developed is a well-known culprit in farmland conversion. It's been mapped and tracked for many years. It includes residential, industrial, and commercial areas typically found in and around cities and towns. It also includes rural industrial sites, such as oil and gas infrastructure and solar development, anything that can be easily identified by satellite remote sensing as built up. Low-density residential development has become a more pervasive culprit, though, and AFT worked with conservation science partners to pioneer an approach to map and quantify the impacts of this type of development on the agricultural land base. LDR areas, as we call them, range from lower density subdivisions to farmettes and ranchettes. This kind of scattered large lot housing fragments the agricultural land base and makes production harder for the farms that remain. It's important to note that some agriculture can often be found on LDR land, and smaller farm parcels, especially those near urban centers, can be quite profitable, even when in those LDR areas. However, our research has found that once land has been converted to LDR, it's far more likely to be converted to UHD. So starting with that historical data, we projected into the future with the business as usual scenario. We adjusted the model to account for population growth or decline in projected areas. Other than that, we made straight line projections using the same annual conversion rates as we had documented historically to predict the level and location of conversion by 2040. Building off that business as usual scenario, we developed two alternatives. We'll get to those in a minute. But in each of the three scenarios, we also mapped the coastal flooding risk that's projected by sea level rise. Once we had our projection of conversion and flooding risk, we quantified the effects of those scenarios. We did that based on agricultural land types, cropland, pastureland, rangeland, as well as on the productivity, versatility, and resiliency values of the land. As with any modeling exercise, there are some caveats. Most importantly, we were not able to account for local zoning. Land use regulations are inherently local, and there is no national database of them. This means that our maps represent the general pattern and rough amount of conversion that's likely based on the conversion patterns from 2001 to 2016. They do not reflect what may be allowed or prohibited on the ground through local land use regulations. Our modeling also does not include the impact of water scarcity and potential fallowing of land because of the lack of water. Mapping this impact is very complex and was beyond the scope of our analysis. You'll see in the web app, however, that we did include a data overlay from the World Resource Institute's Aqueduct, which offers some projections about water availability in the future. So here are the three scenarios that we modeled. First, business as usual. Again, taking 2001 to 2016 data and making straight line projections out to 2040. The second scenario is what we call runaway sprawl. This envisions a scenario where sprawl actually gets worse. We see this trajectory as entirely possible, and it may already be happening in some places, driven by continued high housing costs and shortages in large and small cities, and the likely permanent shift to more remote work opportunities. Remote work will become even more appealing as rural broadband expands and improves. Lastly, we modeled the future we hope for, better built cities. This scenario envisions successful efforts to reduce the footprint of residential, commercial, and industrial development on productive agricultural land. While this scenario still results in conversion of agricultural land, it envisions a future with vibrant, compact cities and towns and abundant farmland to meet the needs of the future. A quick look at the assumptions that went into the three scenarios. For business as usual, we follow the historical rate for UHD and LDR conversion. We adjusted the UHD conversion rate to account for population changes, since we know that population growth has a strong correlation with urban and highly developed land conversion. We did not adjust the LDR conversion rate, though, as there is not a similar correlation between population change and this type of development. For runaway sprawl, UHD remains the same as in business as usual, but we projected a 50% increase in low density conversion from the business as usual scenario. For better built cities, we modeled a 25% reduction in UHD conversion from business as usual and a 50% reduction in LDR conversion. Research has shown that this increased level of density is possible for urban areas. And we went with a more aggressive 50% reduction in LDR because this type of development is not occurring in population dense areas. And we felt that this represented an ambitious but achievable goal. This next slide shows each scenario's potential impact. The gray bar shows that from 2001 to 2016, we converted 11 million acres of ag land in this century alone, including over 53,000 acres in southern New England. Under business as usual, or worse, runaway sprawl, we may see another 18 or even 24 million acres of farm and ranch land converted or threatened by conversion. Conversely, if we make smart choices about where and how we site future development, we can reduce the conversion of farm and ranch land to only 11 million acres. You may be thinking 11 million acres is still too much. Is that really the best case scenario? AFT appreciates that development, including renewable energy development, is necessary. The need for affordable housing is acute. While it may be possible for cities and towns to be even more compact in their growth, we chose what we believe was a realistic scenario, not just a feel-good goal. These next two slides we hope are helpful in showing how Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts compare to other states in projected conversion. This slide shows projected total acres converted by county. The darker the red or rust color, the more acres will be converted. This next slide compares the percent of agricultural land in each county that's projected to be developed. You see a different pattern here, with more of the eastern half of the country turning red, especially here in New England, and especially so in southern New England, because there's a lot of conversion in these smaller counties with lower amounts of agricultural land, so that conversion is a higher percentage of the agricultural land. So next up is a top 12 list that you really don't want to see your state on. This is not good news for some of our New England states, especially all 3 of our southern New England states. The chart on the right shows states that are projected to lose the highest percentage of agricultural land base. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, number 2, 3, and 4, respectively, with projected losses of around 15% of our farmland. Total projected conversion in the 3 states is just under 137,000 acres. Another key finding relates to impacts on our very best agricultural land. For previous reports, AFT created the first ever index of agricultural land quality that looked at the productivity, the versatility, and the resilience of land, or PVR. Land over a certain PVR threshold is land AFT is designated as nationally significant land, which is best suited for long-term cultivation and food production. About 423,000 acres in southern New England is considered nationally significant. What we found in our projections is that the conversion of this land is likely to be higher than the conversion of other agricultural lands, likely because it's flat, well-drained, and relatively free of rocks. The loss of this land is especially concerning. This is land that can produce the highest yields of crops and livestock with the least environmental impacts. Our modeling has shown that nearly half of the projected conversion from 2016 to 2040 will occur on nationally significant land, even though only 38% of the country's farmland and ranchland qualifies for this category. The more nationally significant land converted, the more reliant we become on marginal land for food production. To put this potential loss of 9 million acres of nationally significant land in perspective, the total agricultural land in the US devoted to fruit, nut, and vegetable production is just 10.4 million acres. We're facing 9 million acres of our nationally significant land facing conversion. Our report also sought to specifically address the conversion of land to solar development. And I'm actually going to ask Chelsea to share some of those findings. You're on mute. There we go.
Thanks, Nathan. So as you mentioned, one of the most important threats can you guys see me? I just got a weird notification. Okay, there we go. So as you mentioned, one of the most important threats we are highlighting with this report is the threat that solar development poses to agricultural land. To be clear, American Farmland Trust supports renewable energy development. However, we think it's essential that we plan carefully so that our most productive, versatile, and resilient land is not compromised. We also think it's possible for agriculture and solar to coexist in mutually beneficial ways. This map shows the percent of undeveloped land projected to be used for utility scale solar photovoltaic energy generation facilities by state in 2040. This data comes from the decarbonization with electrification scenario of the US Department of Energy's Solar Future Study. The study estimates that we need to be 7.4 million acres, that there will need to be 7.4 million acres of utility scale solar in place by 2040 to meet federal energy goals. If you're interested in more information about the solar modeling we did as part of this project, our solar technical paper is available through the Farmland Information Center. We will also be releasing a solar white paper later this year. The most important takeaway from our modeling is that 83% of the projected solar development by 2040 will be sited on agricultural land, and nearly half of the projected solar will be sited on nationally significant agricultural lands. We're now going to dive into the data available for Southern New England with on our interactive website, which I highly recommend you all check out. And for this, we're going to be joined by our colleague Beth Frazier, who will be our navigator. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Chelsea, as well. So thanks for joining us, Beth. When you get to the website, you'll be met by a handy overview. You can just X out of it if you want to start. Chelsea, so folks see the presentation bigger on their screen. How about turning your camera off for now? Cool, great. Hopefully everybody can see this well and see it at a good size. So we can X out of this handy overview to start. And if you want to look at it again, you can find it in the About tab in the upper right-hand corner. Looking at that corner, you'll see a How-To tab. That takes you to a 5-minute video that explains how to use the various data layers in the scenario. The View Report tab takes you to our Farmland Information Center, where you can find a full report, an executive summary, and past reports. And we're making our geospatial data layers available to the public as well. If you would like them, the Request Data tab is the place to learn more and to make that request. Okay, so Beth is now going to take us to Connecticut. All you do is just click on the state. When you click on it, it will automatically give you state level information, as well as information on the county that your cursor happens to land on. Scrolling down, you'll see on the left the conversion projections for that state. On the right will be the county that you've clicked on. The darker red shows conversion of UHD. The lighter orange shows conversion of LDR. And below are some numbers that further delineate likely conversion, including acres of Connecticut's best land that is likely to be converted, as well as acres by land type, cropland, pasture land, rangeland, woodland. It also shows the likelihood of further conversion of land from LDR to UHD. Many of the statistics that are available in downloadable state summaries. You'll see a blue tab that says Download Report for Connecticut. As Beth scrolls through this summary, you'll see that it also includes some analysis of the impact of this conversion. These statistics were derived from the 2017 Census of Agriculture. It also shows the 3 counties in the state with the highest levels of projected conversion under business as usual. We hope these summaries will prove useful. We've tried to make them easy to work with, so please consider sharing them with local, state, and federal policymakers, as well as planners. I'm now going to turn this back to Chelsea and Beth, and who are going to take us on a further cruise into some of the maps and provide some further highlights.
All right, thank you, Nate. Before we dive in, I'd like to show you some of the functionalities of the maps and how we can change views to best serve your needs. Beth, can you show the audience the legend up in the right-hand corner? As our base map is currently in the 2016 land cover view, you can see the different colors that represent the modeled land use scenarios and the land cover base map. While we're here, can you demonstrate how we can adjust the transparency of the data by using the toggle in the upper right-hand corner of the screen? Thanks. And now can you show them the various views they can select in the platform? All right, great. You can change your base map by going to the top right corner. You can select the satellite view, giving a bird's eye view of the landscape with selected scenarios stacked on top. With the slider up in the right-hand corner, you can adjust the transparency of the data layer by simply sliding this back and forth. Lastly, you can select the standard view. This view offers more contrast for the data. We encourage you to dive in and try your own cruise around. We're now going to spend some time in the web app comparing the scenarios that we modeled. We're going to see a county in each state. First, we're going to Hartford County in Connecticut. Beth, can you zoom right into Hartford County so we can get a close look at it? The modeling shows, as you would expect, that moving north along Interstate 91 from Hartford and up towards the Massachusetts state line, we see lots of HDR and LDR development. It's really striking along the border with Tolland County and over by Suffield. This loss of farmland occurring along the major transit corridor disproportionately impacts smaller, diversified farms that often serve local markets with fresh produce, eggs, dairy, and meat. Small and peri-urban farms also tend to incubate new farmers and are instrumental in navigating supply chain disruptions. All right, so moving east to Rhode Island now, let's go down and look at Washington/South County. We're seeing a lot more LDR versus UHD development now, especially around the more populated portions with a lot of remaining farmland, south and north Kingston, and even out west in Wyoming. As Nate mentioned, we know that low density residential areas were much more likely to be converted to urban and high density land use compared to other agricultural land throughout the southern New England region. Beth, as long as you are here, can you show us the Rhode Island State Summary? All right, great. And finally, let's go east. Let's go back to the map and go east to Plymouth County in Massachusetts and look at the central portion of it. Here we can see the high acres of conversion, again, with some going to UHD, but with much more of it going to LDR, particularly along major transit corridors and the higher population centers. Beth, how about showing us the state summary for Massachusetts while we're here? All right, I know that these were very brief viewings and not nearly enough time to dig into actual counties. However, hopefully they gave you an overview of the tool and how it can be used when comparing the two maps across these three counties and the acreage data below them. You can see the substantial difference we can make if we invest in policies and programs for smart growth and farmland protection. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Nate.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you, Beth, for navigating with us. Before I go on, just a really gentle reminder for folks: questions are invited. We do have some time at the end of the presentation for questions. I know it's Friday afternoon, but feel free to enter some in there, and the panelists at the end will be able to get to them. So now that we've discussed the findings, we want to take a few minutes to talk about action. What can each of you do to help choose an abundant future? Our report has policy recommendations in each of these four categories and at every level of government. If you're a municipal official, a state legislator, a state agency employee, or a congressional staffer, we hope you'll find a recommendation in here that you'd like to champion. Please let us know if we can provide you with any additional information about any of the policy ideas in the report. If you're a farmer, a landowner, or a community advocate, we encourage you to share and discuss these recommendations with your elected and agency representatives and partners. Let me highlight just a few of the things that we've discussed in the recommendations. Foundational to smart growth and compact development is good local planning. Comprehensive or master plans can provide the vision and roadmap for land use regulations that promote compact development and minimize development of a community's best farmland. We encourage communities to have comprehensive plans and urge folks who care about the future of farmland and farming to get involved in their local plan development and subsequent reviews. We also encourage states to support local comprehensive planning and to have a statewide plan for agricultural land retention and protection. Protecting agricultural land. Congress will be writing a new farm bill next year. An important program in that bill is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which helps to fund the purchase of development rights for willing farmers and ranchers. More funding for that program will help protect more farmland in southern New England. We were excited to see an additional $1.4 billion in funding for this program in the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed the Senate recently. This funding will be key to advancing and supporting many local efforts. Of equal importance to federal funding is state and local funding for farmland protection. Getting that funding in our state and local budgets is crucially important to farmland protection. Advancing smart solar siting. State and local governments can incentivize solar development on existing infrastructure and marginal land, as well as incentivize agrivoltaics or dual-use solar development. If solar is located on productive agricultural land, local governments should ensure that solar development adheres to best practices for construction, operation, and decommissioning to preserve soil health, water resources, and the ability to farm the land during and after the life of the project. AFT has invested significantly in developing resources to help communities, farmers, and regulators understand the threats and opportunities to solar development. Beth, can you drop a link in the chat to our New England Smart Solar Siting work? And if we don't have it handy, we'll do it by the end of the call. Supporting farmland access. A lot of great work is being done by state-based NGOs and extension services, as well as by regional organizations such as Land for Good. And kudos to Rhode Island for standing up the state farmland access program. This work, helping farmers plan for succession, helping farm seekers identify and access land opportunities, and facilitating connections between farmland owners and seekers, is time and resource intensive, but necessary. We hope to expand opportunities for a new and more diverse generation of farmers. State and local governments can play an important role in supporting this kind of work. And now, Chelsea, how about talking a little bit about planning for agriculture and what AFT is doing to address ag land conversion in Southern New England?
Thank you, Nate. As Nate said, there are key strategies that AFT recommends as best practices that have been taken from other places across the nation. Community planning is critically important to smart growth. As part of this planning, AFT encourages communities to plan proactively for agriculture. This involves these 4 basic principles that can work in tandem with efforts to plan for smarter, more compact development. They include inventorying resources in your area, whether that be your productive, versatile, and resilient soils, riparian corridors, or view sheds. Perhaps most important of these is engaging farmers in planning for the future of agriculture. We need to engage farmers in the public process, asking them what's their vision for the future of agriculture in a community. Community planning is critically important to smart growth. In fact, I'd like to call out a resource that is highlighted here on the slide on the left. Planning for Agriculture, a guide for Connecticut municipalities. And I just want to give a shout out to the Connecticut Department of Agriculture for supporting this guide. This guide is for local governments to help identify strategies and associated tools and policies to support local planning goals. This guide encourages communities to incorporate agriculture and other natural resources into community plans, which can be done through comprehensive plans to inform the use of tools to protect these resources. As Commissioner LeBeau mentioned earlier, Massachusetts is currently developing and may release soon a farmland action plan in Massachusetts. And AFT has been a part of the development of this plan. But here in New England, so much planning happens at the local level. It's important for folks to engage at the hyper-local level, as Commissioner Herlbert mentioned earlier, and assure that agriculture is a part of our existing local planning efforts, even if you live in an urban community like I do in Holyoke, Massachusetts. One of the biggest challenges facing farmers in Southern New England, as I think all the speakers on this call have mentioned, is the high cost of farmland. Chief Ayers, you mentioned Rhode Island continues to have the highest cost of farmland in the country, and Massachusetts and Connecticut are not far behind. And I want to acknowledge that in addition to the Farmland Action Plan that's being done in Massachusetts, Connecticut also released a Farmland Access Plan a few years back that AFT worked on. And so we continue to be engaged in supporting New England states and configuring how we can address the farmland access crisis. But I think we're going to need to be pretty innovative, and I look forward to seeing what we're able to do with some of the federal funding that's coming through USDA to look at farmland access. We have a wealth of resources for planning for agriculture, including the guides that I've highlighted here. There are other resources that can be found on AFT's Farmland Information Center website, and we hope that you'll check them out. We want to make sure that we have some time for questions, so how about we take some of those now? Nathan, what do you have for questions?
Sure, we've got a couple questions that have come into the chat. The first one might be easiest for me to just tackle, and then there are a couple that I'd love to hear the panelists discuss. There was a question about if AFT data can be used to estimate development pressure at a local level or at any scale. And I think the easy answer for that is yes. Those projections of farmland loss by county, looking across the country, really being able to understand within a particular state or within a particular group of states or area of the country, which counties have the highest threat of farmland loss is going to be very valuable as we think about trying to make the argument for farmland protection, especially in those high threat areas. Because this is national modeling beyond the county level, the data is just not as robust. You know, if we were to try to look at the pressure on an individual parcel, as I mentioned, our data is not able to account for local zoning. So while we can predict the amount of farmland loss in a particular area based on historical conversion, and that historical conversion would certainly be impacted by local zoning, we don't know exactly where within a particular municipality or even necessarily within a particular county farmland loss might happen. So we can try to predict it based on where we've seen it, but the modeling simply is not as good once we get below the county level. So at the county level and above, yes, these tools can absolutely be used to look at development pressure. Below the county level, much harder. So another question that I think I would love to ask our panelists, you know, Chelsea included, and Commissioner LeBeau had to hop off to get to his next commitment, but I think we still got Chief Ayers and Commissioner Herlbert on the call. The question was asking if the panelists could discuss the challenges and opportunities regarding access to farmland for new farmers. Do New England state governments have programs to support new farmers who want to do commercial farming? Commissioner Herlbert, if you're on and you want to pop your camera back on, and Chelsea, if you want to come back online, the slide's not as important now. Any state programs that you want to highlight that really help with farmland access?
Ken, you want to take a crack, or?
Okay, I'll start off. So we've tried, and I'm sure this is true of our the 3 states, to be as innovative as possible. One is that the state of Rhode Island and my agency owns a lot of land. A lot of it is good farmland, and we've bought it for various purposes over the years. It might be part of a state management area, park, whatnot. We've made a deliberate effort to take the land that we own and make it accessible to farmers in the state that don't have their own access to land. They have, you know, not grown up within a farm family. Land's not been passed down to them. So we've actually turned one state park into to be completely devoted to that purpose. It's called Snake Den State Park in Johnston. It was formerly a multi-purpose state park, but it's an agricultural centric, land access focused park going forward, hundreds of acres devoted to that purpose and a lot of potential. We've also, as an agency, bought a farm. We bought it outright 15 years ago. And while we typically buy a farm and protect it, in this case, we bought it and own it specifically for the purpose of farmland access. We protected it at the same time, but entered into a relationship with a local land trust for $1 a year for them to manage it for us, to provide access to farmers that don't have access to land. They're often ethnic and urban. And so we own a farm, bought a farm deliberately for that purpose. Another thing that we've done recently is we've developed a farmland access program. Again, typically state governments are protecting farmland. That's our main mission, but we don't own it. In this case, we asked for money to be appropriated for the purpose of buying farmland, protecting it, and then selling it to farmers that don't have access to land. The reason that we wanted to go through that route is that sometimes the market will drive up the price of protected farmland. We've seen that over and over again, which defeats the purpose that we have of putting the easement on it. One of the purposes of protecting farmland is that the next person buys the farm and at the farmland rate, not at the highest and best use. So to avoid that scenario happening, we developed a program where we actually are looking for land, we buy it, we protect it, and we only sell it at the appraised value. We don't allow the market to drive up the price. We control that price. And then we entertain applications from farmers to purchase that land. It's under a very prescribed process, and there are regulations that have to do with that. And we completed our first acquisition last year. A young and beginning farmer was able to buy that piece of farmland, 10 acres in Rhode Island, that went through that program, and we're continuing to look for land to run through that program.
In Connecticut, we've got a couple of things that I think would help a new and beginning farmer get access. First is our Farmlink program, where it's the match site for folks who have farmland available and for people who want farmland. So if you're not familiar with that, I suggest you check out CT Farmlink and the parcels that are there. As Chief Ayers was saying, there's the preserved land that we have should keep the price down so that it is more accessible. In previous legislative sessions, I've proposed the opportunity to subdivide future easements going forward so that we can take the large parcels that we've protected or will be protecting. The average size of a parcel that's protected in the state of Connecticut is 112 acres. That's just quite honestly way too much land for many new and beginning farmers. They can't raise the capital to purchase that and then have any remaining flexibility to purchase equipment or seed or bring on a capital or working loan for labor. So the ability to break down, a 100-acre parcel into 5 20-acre parcels is a great way to increase affordability and accessibility for new and beginning farmers. In addition, we've been retooling our grants programs. We have a farm transition grant program that was a $50,000 match program. Great program, worked very well, and had a lot of people take advantage of it. But the reality was that the people who were taking advantage of it were taking advantage of it at the $50,000 max level. If you're a new and beginning farmer, you don't have the $50,000 project to go on, let alone the $50,000 match requirement in order to access those dollars. So we created a small and new and beginning farmer micro grant program. $5,000 max award, $5,000 that you probably wouldn't get through a commercial lender, $5,000 that you wouldn't go to the USDA Farm Service Agency for a loan. And it's a 100% upfront grant. So that $5,000 to purchase a new piece of equipment to bring to your operation to that next level really became what I call our $1 million grant program. Because it's worth that much money to a new and beginning farmer. And so, we tooled it in a way that it was relatively easy to use, recognize the challenges that a new and beginning farmer has, but then also helps tier them and prepare them to get ready for a USDA Farm Service Agency new and beginning farmer loan for that next step in their farm business.
That's great, thank you. Chelsea, are you aware of any other farmland access programs that we'd love to model here in Southern New England?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you're both doing a great job in addressing the farmland access crisis here in Southern New England. And, in addition to Farmlink, or as some of my colleagues like to call it, eHarmony or Farm Harmony, which is a play on eHarmony, that there are a lot of Farmlink programs across the country. So in addition to these matching programs that really are the first step in helping to identify new farmers and connect them with farmland owners, I think there are other programs that might be worth looking at or modeling. And the first one that comes to mind for me is I think Delaware, and there is a state in the Midwest that has a down payment assistance program that actually offers new and beginning farmers some assistance in coming up with the capital for a down payment, because that can oftentimes be a challenge if you don't come from a family with a lot of generational wealth or have access to wealth. So that might be something that we would maybe want to look at here in New England. And on the other side of that is a beginning farmer tax credit, right? So looking to farmland owners and saying, we will give you a tax credit if you sell this land or lease this land to a new and beginning farmer would also be a policy worth looking at. And I know that AFT, there are some AFT staff that are doing research on how effective these policies are. And so I will be curious to know what they find out as a regional policy manager, if these policies are worth pursuing. And then I think that we also have to, when we talk about farmland access, it's hard to not talk about ag viability as well, right? So I know that both of you have programs in your states that help farmers remain competitive and have more access to local markets. And so I think putting funding and increasing marketing opportunities and doing more business technical assistance to work with producers to figure out how to create comprehensive plans to remain economically viable will also be key. Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind for me. Oh, and one more, when we talk about farmland protection, there's also the option to purchase at ag value, which has been extremely successful, an extremely successful provision in Vermont and Massachusetts. I don't know, Nate, if you want to talk more about that, because you have experience working with MDAR and the APR program that has the option to purchase at ag value.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we've seen time and time again is that protected land is not necessarily less expensive land. We might initially think that's the case, but in very wealthy areas, we often see no difference between the value of large, undevelopable estate lots that have conservation easements on them and developable land of equal size and quality right next door. Because people frequently are not buying that land for its development value, they're buying it for its estate value. And so the estate value becomes the highest and best use, and simply protecting land for agriculture doesn't necessarily extract that estate value. And so really looking at tools like options to purchase at ag value that say it is the agricultural value and the agricultural value alone that will determine the value of a property has been effective in many places to further reduce the value of a property post easement. And that can be valuable not only for a future farmer that wants to buy the property, but for the current farmer selling an easement, because it allows for a larger differential between the pre-protected appraisal value and the post-protected appraisal value. And in an area where you may have caps on what you're allowed to pay for an easement per acre, that might present a challenge. But where you don't have a cap, or where you might be able to successfully advocate for an increase in that cap, Commissioner Herlbert, it really allows you to pay a farmer more. Pay a farmer truly what the difference is in the value of that land for agriculture versus all the other uses. So option to purchase at ag value is an incredibly useful tool. One other interesting caveat to add to the tax credit item that Chelsea had mentioned is some states have actually begun to look at tax credits for beginning sales to beginning farmers of not just land, but even things like equipment. You know, for an equipment dealer to be able to get a tax credit for selling equipment to a new and beginning farmer at a reduced value or a reduced cost. Really anything to help bring down the value of bring down the cost to new and beginning farmers. Another question in the chat that I'd like to see if anybody has any thoughts on. It may be a really quick one to answer or not, but somebody shared that ASEP-AL being able to contribute half the cost of an easement isn't necessarily helpful where we don't have that other 50%. You know of any efforts that have been done to catalog those municipalities that might have the resources, they may have matching programs for ASEP-AL, or not just state dollars, but sharing resources for non-state dollars to help find those ASEP-AL matches?
I don't know of any catalog that exists out there. I think it'd be generally helpful. I think, quite honestly, that the towns look to the state and to the feds to bring the funds. I think our land trust and farmland protection organizations generally want to assist on the technical side and the paperwork side, the recruitment side, but not on the ownership or hard dollar contributions to the properties that we've protected. We have communities around the state that are generally more interested or able to help out in different ways. And quite honestly, those applications and projects move quicker, because it's just that much easier to move an application from start to finish when everybody is in alignment, understands the process, and can or knows their role in the way to move it forward. So, but I think if there was a catalog out there, that would be tremendously helpful.
Yeah, same in Rhode Island. For the most part, people look for the state to be the primary matcher. The approach that we take with every single project is to form a coalition of partners to match, to come up with that 50%. And not that every project goes through the federal government either, that they don't. But of the 40 land trusts in Rhode Island, there's probably only 4 to 5 which frankly have the wherewithal to significantly come up with that match. That means that the state government plays an incredibly important role, as well as local entities to the degree possible. So any contribution is helpful. If we have to come up with $400,000 to match the $400,000 on the federal side, if a local land trust gives us 50, fine. It's not like that everybody has to have deep pockets here. So we work hard to pull it all together so we can collectively come up with that match. And I would take that approach, not to think that people have to do this on their own.
Great, thank you. In Massachusetts, just to pinch it here a little bit for Commissioner LeBeau, there is the Community Preservation Act, which is a local option tax that towns or cities can levy on property taxes. It's a very small addition to the tax bill. It provides for towns who elect to do that. It does provide matching funds from the state for those coffers, and those funds can go to any one of several eligible uses, but certain percentage of the funds must go to each of these 3 different categories of uses, and one of them is for open space, recreational, or agricultural land protection. And so there is kind of a catalog of municipalities that have CPA, and those that have it must use a certain portion of those fundings for, like I said, open space protection, recreational land, or agricultural land protection. I think that's the extent of our questions today. I would love to ask Chief Ayers and Commissioner Herlbert any last words or thoughts for the audience. Maybe start with you, Chief Ayers.
Well, I would stress the fact that the collaborative approach to this is key. In the beginning of our farmland protection program 30 years ago, so state government was pretty much the only player, and now we contribute somewhere between a third to maybe a half, and sometimes even less, towards the total pot, because so many others have gotten into the game, for lack of a better word, and are part of this collective effort to preserve farmland in the state. That's really what makes it work, because that stretches all of our dollars a lot further. So don't think that you have to come to the table with big pockets. We all work together to find a way. Any contribution is important, and when we do so, we'll find a way to raise the amount of money to protect those lands that we hold so dear to our hearts.
Thank you, Chief Ayers. Commissioner Herlbert.
Yeah, I would thank AFT for your work on this and your continued partnership to elevate the conversation, the attention to the challenge that's before all of us. I think we all know and recognize that Southern New England is a great place to live for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons is that within half an hour of where anybody lives, you can be out in a rural community, visiting a local farm, participating in an agritourism event, getting the kids in any school district out to understand where their food comes from. Those are all soft benefits that I think we need to start fully realizing and valuing. That it's not just a soft benefit, that it's something nice to do, but the value of having a local food source available to you, the value of having the ecological services for nature and wildlife, the value of the ability to absorb water in these tremendous rain events or hold water in these tremendous drought events is critically important for our states to be successful and for our residents to have a quality of life that we've enjoyed for so long. And we can't do that without having those active working lands in each of our communities. I think we have a tremendous opportunity that the pandemic presented us, that people see that, value it, and understand its importance. And now we need to do the next thing, which is take the appropriate actions to preserve them, to protect them, and to make sure that those components of our community are around for the next however many generations, so that everybody else can continue that benefit.
Thank you both. Those are great great final comments and really good discussion before that. So thank you. This last slide here does have two really good information sources on it that I just wanted to highlight very briefly. The Farmland Information Center is a national clearinghouse for information about agricultural land. It's a treasure trove of information from state policy and laws to statistics to information for landowners interested in protecting farmland. And they answer the phone. You can literally pick up the phone and call somebody and ask them a question about farmland protection, and they will find that answer for you. They're essentially a reference library for farmland protection. It's a great resource. I encourage folks to use it. And there's the National Agricultural Land Network, which is a community of practice working to support farmland protection practitioners across the country, digging deep into challenges and opportunities that those working in this space face. So please sign up for it. If you have questions, please feel free to email me. And for some last closing thoughts, let me turn it back to Chelsea.
Thank you, Nate. So before I say my last closing thought, I would just like to say that as I think about the future of agriculture and the threats that are facing agriculture, like climate change and the farmland access crisis and continued various development threats, I am extremely grateful to have partners like you, Commissioner Herlbert and Chief Ayers, and I know Commissioner LeBeau had to leave us, but it's great to know that we have people that are driving the bus at the state level that care very deeply about making sure that the future of agriculture remains vibrant. So with that being said, thank you both for sharing your insights with us today, and I hope that everyone has a great weekend.